Now it is time for transforming the steel industry via prototyping and personas. And we're going to hear about that from Jonathan Toler, Head of Product and Innovation at Klockner Metals. Jonathan is a product and technology innovator with glorious wins and a few losses in both the B2C and B2B space. Currently, Jonathan is tasked with leading the digital transformation of just an $8 billion steel distributor. So, Jonathan, over to you.
Hey everyone, thanks for having me, and appreciate that wonderful intro as well. So as David mentioned, Klockner is an $8 billion company, and we're a very large company undergoing kind of a digital transformation journey, which I know is very buzzwordy. But really to understand Klockner, you kind of really understand our journey, really understand who we are as a company, right? We are a company built on mergers and acquisitions. We're headquartered in Germany, but we have large lines of business and all over Europe and in North America and even in South America as well. Right. And of course, we're in the steel business, right? So, steel is, really kind of the bedrock of, how things get built all over the world. And so, the way that business has, let's say, transacted with each other and the way people interact essentially has not necessarily changed in almost 100 years, or let's just say 50 years, right? And, one of the biggest kind of, biggest innovative things within the steel industry, we like to joke, is really the fax machine, right? And that was kind of, something that really revolutionized how people talk to each other. And believe it or not, there are still a lot of companies who talk to each other via fax machines now. So long story short is, we're a large distributor. Essentially, if you think about, let's say, your washers and dryers, or you think about, whether it's automobiles or HVACs, we don't make the metal. We're not a steel mill. We're not, we don't have the cool, facilities with all the sparks and, the big people pulling the molten metal. That's not who we are. We're really the middleman to make sure that, those folks who are building your washers and dryers and your ovens can actually get the metal that they need, right? So that's kind of who we are, right? But, and we've done that for, of course, over 100 years. But really, a few years ago, our CEO, as you can see, is a German guy by the name of Giesbert Rule, kind of had this vision and saying, hey, look, we need to kind of change who we are as a company, right? He saw I'm not sure if some of you have seen the Forrester research that says that, I think it's by 2025, that really, over half of all buyers will be millennials, right? And millennials really require, kind of a more digital and a more customer-friendly way of working, right? And really, our leadership saw the writing on the wall and said, hey, look, guys, we have to kind of change who we are, right? So by 2022, here's your goal, right? 60% of all of our sales have to be digital in nature, right? Which is kind of revolutionary, at least for our industry, versus, let's say, the more traditional online world. So essentially, right, we go through this, we have this transformation mission, right? So we talked about we have to be better about how we're going to buy metal, right? So we buy from the mills, or we procure for our customers. So, man, how do we get ourselves better at doing that, right? We figured out, hey, we talked about selling, right? That's kind of the thing. We said fulfillment for us is really saying, look, how do I get the trucks to our customers? We got to be better at that, right? We have to, do the latest and greatest. We have to look at how Amazon does it, right? And then when we talk about administration, we say, man, we have to transform how we actually work our back office, right? How do we, do more with the same amount of people, right? And so those are really all that mission that we were more or less kind of given to say, hey, look, let's go ahead and make ourselves better, and let's go ahead and make some investments in technology that really say, let's go get to that next level, right? And so we're going to make significant investments in technology to kind of push us there. But really, if you think about kind of a lot of companies, right, we kind of got a false start, right? And when people think digital, right, what's the thing we think of first, right? We think about, hey, you know what? Let's roll out an online shop, right? Because, Amazon has an online shop and people talk about Amazon, right? Let's talk about eBay. Let's talk about Home Depot, right? Let's put an online shop out there and, and let's see what happens, right? And I'm not sure if you guys remember what's The Office, right? And when there's that season when Ryan is running the online team, right? And essentially they're just selling the same paper over and over, right? And essentially there's a lot of correlations between, of course, the office and what we do at Klockner, but essentially it's that kind of mindset of saying, hey, if we build the shop, people will come. Well, guess what? People didn't come, at least when we started rolling this thing out at first, right? When we started this process, right? We realized, hey, look, we were threatening employees, right? In terms of people felt they were going to lose their jobs. Our customers didn't see the value in it, right? Because, this is a relationship business, right? If we've been doing things the same way for the last 50 years, why would I go to a web shop and look through and, start type in, the metal that I want when I can just pick up the phone or send you a fax or even send you an email and I can get what I want. It's like a little magic box for me, right? So why would I do that? And then, at the end of the day, right, our customers didn't really, they weren't used to ordering online. It's not something that they had necessarily done, even though it's 2015, 2016, right? The average age of our employee and our customer was over the age of 50, right? So really we had these kind of really factors going against us that said, hey, look, you know what? It's going to be really hard to try to get going, right? To really try to change who we are and make ourselves better, because we more or less just kind of, looked for the solution first and then said, okay, look, here's the solution. Now things should happen, right? And then, of course, lastly, of course, we had an issue with management buy-in as well, right? Our managers, on the other hand, at least up front, were like, hey, you know what? I'm really busy doing other stuff, right? I have the business of buying and selling metal for a profit, and I have to make sure that the trucks arrive on time. I don't have time to think about how can we get better in the future when I'm really just focused heads down on just either staying above water or or really from my certain context providing the best kind of customer service to my customer, right? So we had all these kind of issues running against us. So I like to say we had a false start, but really we said we had a slow start, a false start. So one of the things that we also, I think, have learned really is that, and this is, coming from let's say from a business standpoint as well, I know we have a lot of really, deep UX, customer experience professionals who don't make this mistake. But for regular folks, right, we confuse segments with personas, right? And that's saying, look, I know that I have an OEM customer, right, who is, in the state of Michigan, right? Well, guess what? That is not a persona, right? But for a lot of folks who are just getting down on the starter, they assume that's what a persona is. They assume that saying, look, that I have my little thing of customers. You saw my slide before. So they assume that they have to build, that's how they're going to build solutions as well, right? That you're going to build solutions for, oh, you know what, my HVAC. So what do I need to do? I need to buy my keywords for the HVAC. And that's really all I have to do is just, get those HVAC keywords and, figure out what those HVAC buyers are really buying. And that's going to make me successful, right? And we figured that wasn't working. That's not successful for us. So we didn't get a lot of traction there. So really, what do? We need empathy, right? And, empathy is, of course, a big word that we teach our kids about, how to feel what others feel. But, in this, if you think about what we do from a product standpoint, what we do from a customer experience standpoint, what we do from a UX standpoint, that's all, the most successful people in our business have empathy, right? They understand what people's problems are and they understand how to help people either feel better or help people achieve the goals that they want to achieve, right? And that's something that we needed, right? And and it's really funny, Klockner is interesting, right? Because we are a steel company, right? We're not a technology company. So I will admit, right? I know a lot of people don't like to admit this, but we went out and got a consultant, right? We got a consultant. We hired some full-time people. We have an innovation lab in Berlin, but essentially we said, hey, look, instead of us just going out the gate and going, we need to go and hire professionals and we need to get that kind of that feedback. So we made that investment with the consultants, right? And one of the things we really understood when we brought in consultants and we brought in, real professionals who have built, let's say, software in the past, is said, look, let's walk a mile in people's shoes. And so what you kind of see on the screen right now, for example, is on the right-hand side, which is the most interesting side, at least for me, and you see three people, right? You see a guy in an orange shirt, right? That's one of our customers, right? He's that's in Tennessee, by the way. He's a big Tennessee Volunteers fan. So if you couldn't tell with that color shirt, and the guy beside him is our sales guy, right? He's one of our sales reps. And as you can see, our sales rep is mobile. He's got his backpack. He's walking the floor with the customer, right? They're going around, they're looking at the metal, right? If you see this little circle thing by the guy in the orange sweater, that's our metal that's there, right? That we've actually supplied to them, right? And then in the background, you also see a guy who's a machine operator as well, right? And all three of these folks in this picture actually have something to do with how the buying process, right? How is that customer of ours going to be successful, right? On the left hand side, you also have in this wonderful little obviously scanned piece of paper is actually how some of these customers actually buy, right? It's not so imagine you're buying, let's say you see 50 different items you have to buy, right? If you have to go buy 50 things from Home Depot, right? You don't really want to go search 50 times, every time you want to buy, right? And let's say you're buying something every day or every week, right? That's something that maybe we missed a little bit, right? So long story short, really said, look, how do we walk a mile in the shoes of our customers? So really we said, look, let's have new data I wouldn't say new data collection techniques, but let's think about how do we collect data differently, right? So let's figure out, of course, who all of our stakeholders are, right? And then let's go and interview all of our stakeholders, and our stakeholders not just being direct stakeholders, but also being indirect stakeholders as well, right? So yes, we got to go interview buyers. That's easy, right? But then let's also go interview the buyer's boss, right? Then let's go interview the people who supply us the metal, right? Because they fit into this whole ecosystem, right? And then of course, within our own company, let's not just talk to our salesperson, because that's very easy for us to talk to our salespeople. Let's also talk to the guy who runs our credit department, the people who do AP, right? The people who actually are the drivers, right? So because we're on this whole idea of not just transforming how we sell metal, but we want to transform all of who we are, right? So we have to understand who we are, from a 360 view, who are all of our personas within our company, right? And that's something that we had actually really never really done, right? It's not something that you really really think about doing when you more or less have an e-commerce mission, right? But essentially, while the e-commerce mission was the primary focus up front, right? Creating these personas or creating this data about how do people actually work really helped all of our, helps us really in the future. And we'll kind of talk about that a little bit later. All right. So one of the things we learned, a few things, right, is we learned something that was just, and I said we learned, right? It's something that maybe I say we, just so you guys get some background, right? Is I am not a native of the steel industry, right? So so I actually learned this in terms of like, man, this is interesting to think about, right? Is that really, for example, like you see sales A, right? The sales A person is not necessarily wasn't really worried about, hey, you know what? Let me make sure that I, get the highest price, and let me make sure that I I try to, let's say, get the most margin, right? Which is something that, margin is really big in our industry, being a middleman. But really, their biggest focus is saying, look, I just want to make sure that the customer's orders are out the door, because I don't want to let customer A down. Because if I let customer A down, then I know customer A is going to have a bad day, because guess what? He's running a factory, right? Or he's building a bridge somewhere, and then he can't build that bridge, and then really bad things happen. So what we found is our sales was very service oriented, right? And they really just wanted to make sure that they had a very lean and the most efficient way to kind of get things done, right? Customer A, for example, what we found is a lot of our customers are like, hey, look, you know what? We do business with you because you're going to give us a good price, right? So I don't want to spend a whole bunch of time negotiating prices, or even comparing, between your price and other people's prices, like a traditional kind of web shop or a traditional kind of, e-commerce experience. I just need to make sure that you can get me the metal on time, right? And the same thing kind of goes for customer B, right? You start learning that, hey, guess what? This B2C idea of like people are only price shopping, right? Guess what? In the B2B world, we figure out, hey, guess what? They're not just price shopping. They actually just want to know, can you supply what you want, and can you provide us the transparency and the reporting tools so that you can make our life easier as we try to procure, right? And that's something that we had to learn, right? And we only learned that by really getting to the nitty gritty and actually going out and talking to not just the high level guy, but talking to the guy on the floor, right? So remember that guy we saw in the background, talking to that machine, the guy who's running the machine, and saying, hey, what do you need to be successful, right? And the guy running the machine says, look, I just need to make sure that I don't run out of metal, right? Or I need to make sure that I don't even have to worry about that, right? Because I just want to worry about actually making sure this machine cuts or folds the metal or does whatever. That's all I want to worry about. I don't want to worry about if the machine has metal, right? And that's one of the things that we learned, and we said, hey man, how do we solve that problem, right? But then understanding that problem, we also said, man, we also learned a little bit about kind of who our customers are and what are things that they can and can't do, right? So for example, the guy who's working in the office and who's dealing with Excel every day, he's going to have different needs and different abilities than maybe the guy who's working on the machine, or the guy who maybe doesn't actually even have access to his own computer, right? And that's something that we learn about often, right? Is that you assume that everyone has access to a machine, to their own computer, but really, guess what? They don't, right? Or you may have really, really strict firewalls, right? So we actually learn as we build things, right? We have to maybe not use a certain, certain way of delivering content, right? Because someone's, corporate firewall policy may be different, right? Or maybe a little bit more stricter than we as technology professionals are used to, right? And that's something that we kind of had to realize, right? And then lastly, which is really big in our industry, which is something to think about from if you're working in a kind of a B2B world or a manufacturing world, is that you're going to have union regulations, right? You may have a lot of turnover in certain roles. These are all things that kind of that more or less, when you're kind of living in a pure e-commerce or a pure kind of a software world, you don't think about, hey, you know what, by the way, I got to make sure that if I give somebody a tablet or a notebook, that they're even allowed to have that on the floor, right? Because maybe their union rep, the union rules don't allow them to have that, things like that. So those are all things that we're going to work through. And then, we had to understand kind of what's going on there. So, oops, sorry, I messed up my, okay, there you go, cool. The other great thing about us going through and trying to get this data for the personas and really understanding in deeper knowledge of how people really operate was really, we had kind of a little bit of back and forth of really who's teaching who, right? And so really as our people are there shadowing people and really getting in back and forth about really what's what is your process, we're also found that, because remember, we're a company built on mergers and acquisitions, right? And we're over 170 different locations worldwide. You start realizing that, hey, as we're asking the questions, sometimes we're actually sharing information about how maybe another country does something, or another region, or another one of our manufacturing facilities, or even another customer, one of their processes. And then it's going back and forth and saying, man, they do it that way? Well, that's interesting. Like, what if if you solve this for me, maybe you can solve this for them that way. Or, what, maybe I'm willing to change my process if there is some better way for us to work together, right? So one of the cool things that we saw was that as we started doing this process and getting out and really kind of figuring out and doing our process mapping and our BPMs and things like that, we started really realizing that our customers, especially our stakeholders, our internal stakeholders, started even talking to each other and saying, hey, what did you tell them? Right? Oh, okay, that's cool, right? So can you show me how you guys do this, right, in the ERP? Or how do you guys report on this? Or how do you guys service this customer this way, right? And so we saw a lot of really positive kind of organic benefits by just us getting out there and asking certain questions, right? So getting buy-in, right? So let's kind of talk about that a little bit. So one of the, we have a very kind of, at least our process is probably what I call a very normal and nothing groundbreaking here, right? So, we would go out and we build requirements, right? And, we socialize the personas, and, socialize the use cases, and essentially really, you build your wires, and really, let's just be honest, right? Like a lot of lay people, they see a wireframe and they're like, yeah, okay, cool, right? But then, right, we started building kind of, your clickable comps inside of InVision, or, whatever your tool is that you use to really kind of create clickable prototypes. But really something funny happens during at least for us, during the Envision process, and that's really saying that's where we started gathering excitement, right? And when I say gathering excitement, we actually used a lot of the kind of the clickable prototypes to actually kind of create a little bit of a buzz among our salespeople, or among kind of our frontline staff, because once they got to see something and click it and play with it, right, it started becoming more realistic, right? You started thinking to yourself, man, okay, look, if my customer can do this, or if I can see this data, wow, this is really going to maybe change my life, or it's going to make things a lot easier for me. So really for us, those clickable prototype really it's just really funny how it really got people kind of believing, right? It wasn't just this abstract concept. It was something that really kind of got them going and got them excited. So I'm going to give you an example of, okay, yeah. So during this process, right, we talked about kind of this post, just throwing out a web shop out there. But really we said, look, we went out and we learned about, hey, people just want a more efficient way to get metal to them. So we built this proof of concept, right? And right now we call it Part Manager. And essentially we said, look, can we cover two of those 7 personas of, like, hey, the people who don't want to negotiate prices with us, and the people who just really want to be, make sure that they have the metal and see what metal we have in stock, right? How do we solve that problem for what we call our contract customers, right? And so we launched it in 12 weeks, right? And it didn't scale very well, right? But at the end of the day, it was something that we launched with, maybe, I think it was like 2 or 3 customers. And we said, look, 2 or 3 major customers said, look, can you guys just use this and let's see what's happening, right? How's it going to work for you, right? And just give us, constant feedback, right? But we treated it definitely as a prototype. Just kind of give you an example of kind of where we are now, right? That during that process, right, from that little 12-week proof of concept to really 3 years later, right, we were able to get such great feedback that now that tool has become what we call one of our flagship e-commerce tools, right? And using that same process of really saying, look, how do I create some, understand who these personas that we're trying to actually target, creating the prototypes, and then just getting it out to market, and then iteratively improving, right? As we use our agile buzzwords that way, right? But essentially, we've pitched and launched 6, maybe 7 different products that have kind of really touching all of our customers, right? Where we've gone from really saying, look, here's just do this as a favor for us, and just so you can give us feedback, to something that our customers demand when they do business with us. Hey, I want to make sure that I'm using your Part Manager portal, or I want to use what we call Klockner Direct, which is something that we use for our spot business, right? Our customers are demanding it from us because we were able to do the work ahead of time and really understand the data that they want, right? So one of the things we're really proud of is our 69 Net Promoter Score, right? And that, for us, that shows that there's definitely a strong demand and a strong desire, and a strong affinity, of course, from our customers for our products. The other cool thing too, as you can see from the slide too, is that a lot of those salespeople who may have been a tad skeptical, right, they're now digital evangelists, right? They're out every day, they're pushing this, they're encouraging their customers to use these tools, because we're not just making their lives easier, but we're reducing the number of errors, right? We're doing a lot of other kind of back office kind of operations improvements that they really, really love, right? The other thing too, this is one of my favorite. This is kind of a pet project of mine, but we built this mobile prototype, right? And the idea was really, we had this one customer, that said, hey, look, you know what? I'm tired of using all these Excel files, and I got to go out and just count every day about what's going on. And there's got to be a better way for me to go and tell you, what I've used, right? So then you can tell me, of course, how much metal you want to send me, right? So we built this mobile prototype. We spent very little money. We bought the Android tablets, and long story short is we built this prototype in the same kind of time frame, right? That 10 to 12 weeks, just to kind of see what's going to happen, right? If it doesn't work, then it's not going to work. But one of the cool things is that, like I said, it only costs us $2,500, but we do a lot of money through that feature now in the future. But the other thing is we realized, hey, you know what? Maybe serving this as an independent app isn't going to work. So then we said, look, what's this functionality this app is doing? Let's build it back into our core experience, and then let's see if that works too, right? And that prototype of just even putting it out there and seeing that the customer can order mobily, we realized, look, let's just put it back into the app. Let's put it back, into the web experience. And our customers love the feature, right? They're out there scanning a QR code and telling us exactly what type of metal that they want from us. And it was something that didn't cost us a lot of money. And at the end of the day, we also made the really conscious decision to say, we don't need a mobile app for this, but we know our customers really want this, and it's something that our customers really, really love. So lessons learned, right? The first lesson, at least for us that we learned, is that personas have to be socialized, right? And so what that really means for us is that as our UX team, whether they were consultants or our UX teams in Berlin, or even our product folks, are there really doing the research and going in hand, we actually socialize all that research with our customers, right, with our executives. A, to make sure that they felt good about it, but B, also because it helped them kind of think about, yeah, you know what, I do fall into this category, or I do think that this customer falls into this, this bucket that we're putting people in. And really, we had debates, right? We had debate. We have debates with our product people now about, hey, look, between salespeople, is this customer in this bucket, or do we need to create a new bucket, right? We use the word bucket instead of persona. But these are things that kind of the way that we're thinking has really helped us change, because we're socializing really, how do we classify a customer, not just from a segment standpoint, but really how does that customer actually, get his job done, right? And that's something that has been really, I think, really helpful, as opposed to doing what we call like the big reveal at the end, right? Of saying, oh, here's this big, thick kind of binder of our research, go for it, right? We try to socialize these things early, right? Pictures are worth 1,000 words. I will tell you this, is that us putting the finished comps in front of our sales, in front of our executives, hands, really brought buy-in, right? Because it became something tangible, something that people could start imagining, right? And that was something that I think it really just turned some of our skeptics into either believers or into, yeah, I'll give it a shot, right? So, like I said, I think if you can build comps, especially pretty comps, get them in the hands of a decision maker, because a lot of times that decision maker may help you kind of keep pushing forward, right? Then lastly, videos, of course, worth lots of money, but really for us is we took videos of a lot of our interactions with especially customers, right? And getting that customer feedback from even looking at the clickable prototypes really helped us kind of convince a lot of our customers, a lot of our executives, to say, hey, look, this customer loves it, right? They're all about it, right? Are you willing to keep funding this? Are you willing to keep moving us forward, right? And we found a lot of our executives were like, hey, yeah, heck yeah, man, you're what? Obviously, this customer is one of our good customers. We're looking at their reaction as not just it's an authentic reaction, and it's something that really we saw a lot of success off of, because we did share that video, that the actual video feedback of what our customers were actually saying, while either using our clickable prototypes, or by even just using the tool in some of our first round of feedback. So I promised I would keep it concise. I know I went a little bit longer than I wanted to, but yeah, I think that's it. Like I said, I'm Jonathan, and feel free to reach out, and really thank you guys for letting me share our story.
Thanks, Jonathan. We've got a comment and 2 questions, so stay with us, because I want to give you that comment and let you answer the 2 questions. The first comment is from a friend of the show, Randy, who is hosting Room 3 today. Thanks to him for that. He said, wow, this case study is refreshing after seeing so much e-commerce and social media. So thank you for that. Then we've got 2 questions. Our first question is from Patricia, and she said, did you run into any pushback from stakeholders about already having this tribal knowledge, meaning we already know this because we've been doing this forever, so we don't need to do the interviews? How did you handle that?
Yes, so we did have a little bit of that, and we actually get that in terms of, um, I'll put it this way: a lot of the pushback we actually got was it was less about do we need to do the interviews. It was mostly along the lines of, hey, I know this isn't going to work for my customers, so don't even bother. Right. So that was kind of the first step. Right. And then really what we actually found, we found that first success. Once we get that first success, we kind of use that as like a, you know, to kind of co-op and to say, hey, look, if this guy can do it, why can't you do it, right? Or why can't we at least just try to start there? And that's something that we found was like, yes, we got a little bit of that, but once we had that kind of first really positive feedback from someone, we kind of use that as almost like a magic shield to say, hey, just give us a shot. And then that was kind of one thing. The other thing too is that we were very mindful of, we had a lot of salespeople who were super busy, so they didn't actually have time, or logistically we couldn't get out to every customer. So we did kind of try to pick and choose our battles and saying, give us friendly customers first, and then we'll work our way to the more difficult ones.
Great, great. And the last question we have so far, as she says thank you, the last question is from, and I'm sorry if I pronounce this name wrong, Alicia. She asks, how did you socialize your personas with your team and stakeholders?
Sure. Yeah. So we actually use the good old fashioned webinar for at least for the internal ones, right? So you know, something that's of course very similar to just using GoToMeeting or whatnot, or I guess Zoom. I guess we should use give shout outs where shout outs are due.
Oh,
Um,
after this morning, maybe not, but go ahead.
okay, but so we use that for the internal stakeholders. Right, we presented. There was a very a regular kind of feedback loop that we presented internally. And then, of course, externally, right, it was more of the checking feedback off of things we presented to, let's say, the customers, and then being very proactive with customers and really trying to get their buy-in. And then the other thing too is just one thing we also set up was whenever we went to go see someone, or we'd actually start off and saying, hey, look, we want to bring in lunch to your office and we want to ask you a few questions or give you some updates, right? So we try to create certain regular cadences with some of our friendlier major customers. And a lot of times that was predicated on us buying them lunch, right? So
You can always pry and ply people with those free food and donuts.